The What to Next podcast helps you build a TBR of future favorite books. In each episode, Lori and Maine interviews authors and book influencers to recommend books they loved for you to pick up today. If you're an avid reader, always looking for your next great read, then the show. Hi, Jewel. Welcome to What to Next podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you've been up to, because you've been a guest from the show before.
Yeah, I have been a guest. What have I been up to? Writing. I feel like the past year, I think it's been about a year or so since we last chatted. I have written way more than I thought I would. I've dug up some old manuscripts and dealt with those to put those out. But other than that, I'm a busy mom. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are adults now, but I help my youngest, who is now 15. He does some online schooling for his dyslexia. So I am a teacher helper during the day. I say I'm a full-time writer. It is, quote, my full-time job, but it's very few hours a day that I get to devote to it. So I have been busy, but life has been good. Have you been well as well?
I've been well. Yeah, I've been settling in. It's been an interesting time. We're just kind of healing, doing the inner work of healing internal stuff and just seeing how the process flourish. So it's been I got to see my family and spend 3 weeks with my family just last week. So I was actually in Puerto Rico, and allowed me just to get out of, at the same time being productive and doing this on a daily basis now. So which is kind of exciting.
That is exciting. It's interesting trying to get that perfect balance of work life, but keep me emotionally, balanced. So kudos to you for finding that right now. That's awesome.
So tell me, how do you balance it all? You mentioned you bust out some old manuscripts and polish them out. So what was the process of these books were written a couple of years ago or a while ago, and then realized I'm maybe could be something, there's a need to the story here.
Yeah. My release that I had here, my last release before us, it was one that I wrote several years ago when I wrote for Lucy. I wrote both of them for potential books to submit to publishers, but it was a really weird time because of COVID and what is everyone's mental frame of mind? Do you put these more serious subject matter books out there? So I self-published for Lucy. I held back on Before Us, and it's one that I did put to quite a few publishers. I changed an agent in the process. A lot went on with the process. I had a couple that were very interested, but they kind of all fell through. So I self-published this book. So it was, for me, recently putting that book out. Mm-hmm. It was weird because I was going back and polishing it and becoming reacquainted with it. I've been working on, I have written, so my new release, If This Is Love, it's something I've recently worked on. That's what I worked on the end of last year.
Yeah.
But right now, of course, that one's done and out. But right now, I'm working on some novellas actually that were published either anthologies or they were published for newsletter builders. So these short stories that have to be kind of fast paced because they're a short story. I'm working on a couple of those to make them into full length novels because I had enough people that were we want more of this. And so it is really crazy going back and trying to stretch it into a full length novel. They won't be 100,000 word full length novels, but we'll get them, maybe 60,000 words. But it's weird because I'm having to slow the pacing a little bit. I'm tweaking a few things with what I've already written, but not a lot. I would, somebody, if they didn't like it, no need to jump in and read it again. I'm not changing really the first part, but it's challenging for me. But I love a challenge. As a writer, if I'm not challenged, then I become very unsettled. I need to have a challenge. It's why I write all over the place. I write comedy and suspense. Even when I'm writing from point of view, sometimes it's first person, dual point of view, sometimes it's third person. So I need a challenge. And these novellas, turning them into a full length novel, a couple of them, they are really challenging, but in a really fun way, a good way. I need that mental challenge.
I think it's as exciting as someone who has a love-hate relationship with novellas. I love them because they're fast-paced. You can finish them in a sitting, and it's great. But at the same time, I always leave with I want more, And that's the feeling, and I want more. It's you're treating us to that, but then it's how do you make them to have more without losing its
Oh,
essence.
I get it. And I don't like writing them. I do it when somebody asks me to be in an anthology that's
Yeah.
usually going on some charity thing. You're like, yep, I can do this for a good cause. Or I've done it for like some newsletter builder things with different authors. But I don't sit down on my own for no good reason and think I'm going to write this novella or short story. But I will say, and because I myself don't read a lot of novellas or short stories either, and because I love the character development, I like pacing things, I like really, fleshing out characters. So in a novella, that's clearly harder to do, and you just feel a little bit cheated. But again, it's like that challenge, like somebody saying, give me a story in 4 sentences or something, that challenge of the way, like coming up
Yeah.
with elevator pitches for something, or just like this short blurb where you're like, okay, this is a challenge. I don't always love it, but it's good for me. So I do it.
I am excited for these projects for sure. And so, how do you switch? Because you write across genres, you're not like stuck into one genre, one formula, and stuff like that. How do you switch over? Like, is it based on like you write an emotional book and then you take a break and maybe write something more lighter or like more darker, or like how do you switch around?
Yeah, it's pretty easy for me. Like right now, because in the United States, I don't have anything traditionally published. So I'm not really at, on a publisher's deadline or them telling me I want these books and so many of them in a certain amount of time. I do love the fact that I can write like I read. I'm a mood reader. So I don't have necessarily a favorite type of book or favorite trope, and I just binge those all the time. Sometimes I'm in the mood to laugh. Sometimes I'm like, I want something dark and gritty. And then other times I want like the mystery, or I want something that I know is going to make me cry. I'm an emotional person. So I'm a mood reader. So therefore, when I sit down to write, it's just basically like, what do I want to write? And I can take one story idea that maybe I've had in my head, and I can decide whether that story idea is going to be a lighter story or if I'm going to make this more serious. Because it's funny how you can take one idea and it can go in a lot of different directions. It's not that, oh, I'm going to write a romance, or like I'm going to write an office romance, which I don't really write many of those. And therefore it's going to be kind of more of a romantic comedy. I could write a pretty serious, office romance if I wanted to. It's what I'm in the mood for, which is nice. I think as much as you would love to have this gigantic success where publishers were offering you all kinds of money to write certain things, for me, I think because I'm my age and I write for a living, but I'm not caring if I'm, this multi-million-dollar making author. I want to always love what I do. And I love just being able to write what I'm in the mood for. I think the words become more authentic when it's not forced. I'm doing it for myself.
Yeah, and I think it just allows the reader to see a plethora of opportunities. You can find readers who might like the more lighter stuff. You can find readers who like the emotional, the angst, the push, have a tearjerker,
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, like finding, like you can find pockets of audiences, for each of the book, and then be like, oh, like if you like this, and try all these other books. And I'll link to our previous episode because you did talk about if you like this mood, you can try these books for your backlist. But I think it's great. Like honestly, and it's authentic. Like just writing what you feel like you're called to write, as opposed to what you think you should be writing.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about if this is love. So tell us the elevator pitch.
The elevator pitch for This Is Love. If the man that you love and that you've loved forever is forced to marry your enemy. That is the quickest one. It's a romance set in Texas on a ranch. It's the first time I've written, quote, a cowboy romance. It is an age gap. These are really awful people. Think of, like, I don't know, for people who are Yellowstone fans, I think they will love this book. So and I wrote the Naked Fisherman series a couple years ago, which is kind of a forbidden romance, age gap romance. So I call this book, If This Is Love, the marriage of Yellowstone meets the Naked Fisherman. And it was just a really fun book to write, but it's angsty. It has characters that you love to hate. There's characters in this that readers will be like, I hate them. They will be so angry with these characters, but I built them for that purpose. It's very heartbreaking at times, but because of it being an age gap and where the two characters meet when they're young, even though there's an age gap, he's clearly a little bit older, but she's young, and the developing the relationship between them is just, to me, so magical because they both come from very unconventional backgrounds. She has an awful family that she comes from. His family is gone. His brother's in prison. There's like all of these little intricate details that make this story, in my mind, writing it, it was very addictive to write it because it felt like, what's going to happen next? Oh my gosh, is this going to happen? And there's the push and pull, and the forbidden element is really strong in it. So yeah, I hope readers like it. So far, what, minimal feedback that I've gotten has been really good. And so we'll see how the weeks progress here, but I'm excited.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited for this one. You had me at cowboy, or your take on a cowboy, and your take on like this is Naked Fisherman, age gap forbidden, but same time, here's characters you're gonna hate because sometimes you gotta root for those characters you're gonna hate. Like
Yeah.
it brings those emotions, and you're like, okay, yes,
Yeah, it's not like, it's, and I don't have a problem with this. Some people are like, oh, I hate when romance novels are based on some type of misunderstanding, which I don't always hate that because sometimes that's life. I write about a lot of life stuff. Like this book isn't about misunderstanding. This is just about like hardcore life circumstances, things you're forced into, blackmailing people, like things like that have just, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed disliking a lot of these characters, and the ending is hard earned.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, I'm adding this to my queue for sure. So, all right. So, Joel, tell us like what kind of books will you recommend our listeners to pick up? What have you been reading lately?
Oh gosh. Sadly, I don't get to read near as much as I used to because, I have 10 billion other things that I'm doing. So reading has become such a luxury for me. It's funny. I don't read. I think people are always surprised by this. I don't read a ton in the romance genre. I do read a handful of romance books every year. I have some of my favorites that I try to get their books read. But like for me, as far as recommending things in the romance genre, I'm a huge Ali Martinez fan. I think that she does amazing. Like I love her regret duet that she has. Mm-hmm. She writes suspense so well, and I always think I'm going to figure it out, but I never do. And she has such great character development, and her plot twists are so good. And I love her style of writing. And they're always, they're these sexy romance at the same time. Recently, I finished off Kate Stewart's Bittersweet Symphony series, how she expanded on that. Drive was my favorite book for like a very long time. Anytime you can incorporate music and a rock star and a really cool story and an ending you're not expecting. So that one is one that is a go-to for me. My most recent one I read was Jennifer Hartman's The Heart Song duet. And it was so good. Jennifer, I always say that, and I've read several books of hers. I feel like she writes to my soul sometimes. Like I like these angsty, grip your heart, rip it out, put it back together books. And she does it so well. Her writing is just fantastic. She's so great at her craft. That's kind of like my romance recommendations. But for me, like when I'm not reading romance, I'm a huge like Jodi Picoult fan. I love her book House Rules. I love Jodi's writing because she always tackles the hardest subject matters. Like she doesn't hold back from anything. And I love, there's always suspense. There's, usually some court case, but the subject matter is usually really deeper and darker. And I say that at some point, if ever I continue to write more in the women's fiction area, I would love to write Jodi Picoult books, but I don't feel secure enough yet that I can tackle some of the subject matter without, I don't want to say offending people, but when it's a difficult subject matter, you usually have two very, opinionated sides to it. And I think she does a great job of writing it where you don't actually probably know where she stands herself personally on it. She's just like putting it out there for readers to like, they're great book club books. And that's what I like. I mean, I like writing books for Lucy. I felt was that way before us. I felt was that way. Like this book club look like, let's talk about kind of some of these controversial topics and what would you do? But it's not like I'm putting out as an author what I think. It's just handing it to the audience. I love Lisa Jewell books. When I want my suspense fix, that's not necessarily romance, but the thrillers. What is it? Then She Was Gone is my favorite Lisa Jewell book so far. And eventually I'm going to jump into some more fantasy type stuff. I haven't jumped into the fantasy romance, but boy, everyone talks about it. And I keep saying I'm going to do it, but I haven't gotten there.
I have a recommendation for you for fantasy romance. I would say The Serpents and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. It's a pretty fast-paced, like it's a tome, but it's fast-paced. It's about vampires and a trial where they're actually competing and they're enemies to lovers. She's been trained to compete in this trial. She's a human, and her enemy becomes her partner and then love interest. And there's a lot of suspense. There's a lot of push and pull. And it's a really good one. It's part of a series. It's the first book in a series, but it ends at like it's a minor cliffhanger. So it's a pretty good, solid, fantasy romance. Similar to ACOTAR, but you don't have to slog through the first book because I hated the first book of ACOTAR. So this one is actually pretty good. So
awesome. Yeah, I mean that's kind of like talking about mood writing and mood reading. Like sometimes you just like, as much as I love the serious, like talking about Jodi Picoult books, the serious subject. Other times, like you just want to escape reality. Like give me some vampires. I just need that reality escape. So
yeah. Vampires, aliens, or monsters. Men are the worst. We're gonna like look for some other species. So, Jewel, tell us where we can find you online.
Oh, I am on probably Instagram the most. I have Jules Jonesies as my Facebook group, and I'm pretty active in there. I am on TikTok. I'm not fantastic on TikTok, so Instagram's the best place. I do have a YouTube channel that I put vlogs up on, and I think it's Julianne Writes. And then, of course, I do have a website, julianne.com. You can email me. There's a contact there. So I'm kind of everywhere, but probably Instagram's where I'm most active.
Awesome. Thank you, Jewel, for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For a list of books mentioned and other romance recommendations, please visit whattoreadnextblog.com. Did you know you can purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore? With Libro.fm, you can pick up more than 250,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from real booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company, you know the name, but you'll be part of a different story, one that supports your local community. If you're new to audiobooks, there's a perfect way to squeeze into more reading into your busy life. Listen with the free Libro.fm app while you do your chores, walk your dog, relax at home. The What to Read Next podcast has a special offer for our listeners. Get 2 audiobooks on Libro FM for the price of 1 with your first month of membership. Use code What to Read Next. This offer is only valid for new members in Canada and the US. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.